So the way I'll cover these pages is I'll discuss the central theme of each page, talk about it a bit, perhaps read the page, and the discussion will focus on the contents of a page at a time. A particular talk will cover 10 pages, and the book is Abstract Algebra, Algebra Abstract and Concrete, Frederick Goodman. So it starts with the idea that there are mathematical objects that are found by the awareness. These are self-existent. Otherwise, the awareness would not be able to access it. A thing that is found is not made by the awareness, so to speak, or constructed by it. Even if we were to take into consideration the fact that there are constructed objects, objects the awareness can construct, mathematics deals with the operations by which the awareness can construct these objects. So these fundamental entities that are found by which we can construct the world, that is the study of mathematics, that is physics, and that is algebra. So the text goes on to say the first task of mathematics is to understand the found objects in the mathematical landscape. We have to try to understand the integers, the rational numbers, polynomials, matrices, and so forth, because they are there. They are self-existent. They can be used to describe reality because these are the self-existent structures that underlie the reality that is generated by the awareness, operating through these structures, operating on these structures through the force of the operators and these fundamental forms that are available. So algebra deals with the question of what these structures are, what the awareness operations are, and so on. In this chapter, we'll examine objects that are familiar and concrete, but we'll sometimes pose questions about them that are not so easy to answer. Our purpose is to introduce the algebraic themes that will be studied in the rest of the text, but also to begin the practice of looking closely and exactly at concrete situations. We begin by looking into the idea of symmetry. What is more familiar to us than the symmetry of faces and flowers of balls and boxes of virtually everything in our biological and manufactured world? And yet, if we ask ourselves what we actually mean by symmetry, we may find it quite hard to give an adequate answer. We will soon see that symmetry can be given an operational definition, which will lead us to associate an algebraic structure with each symmetric object. I'll read the next two paragraphs before discussing symmetry a bit. What is symmetry? What is symmetry? Section 1.1. What is symmetry? Imagine some symmetric objects and some non-symmetric objects. What makes a symmetric object symmetric? Are different symmetric objects symmetric in different ways? The goal of this book is to encourage you to think things through for yourself. Take some time and consider these questions for yourself. Start by making a list of symmetric objects. A sphere, a circle, a cube, a square, a rectangular box, etc. What do we mean when we say these objects are symmetric? How is symmetry a common feature of these objects? How do the symmetries of the different objects differ? Close the book and take some time to think about these questions before going on with your reading. Perhaps you would like to contemplate the picture of the rug on the following page while thinking about symmetry. Now, symmetry wouldn't exist unless the awareness scan or the awareness generation of structures had a symmetry in the very operation of that scan. If a line were to be scanned in one direction, there is an underlying symmetry that enforces a symmetric scan. These, these symmetries appear in physical laws, in the world we see, which is mathematical and constructed by the awareness as quantum physics suggests. Um, and because they have not yet learned to think from this perspective, uh, it seems a mystery. it is as if they are trying to model a reality with mathematics, which is not so. It's more along the lines of the awareness using mathematics to structure reality. So the mathematics of that is the mathematics of the quote unquote found objects, and that is the physics too. These are not two distinct fields. So, so this is why symmetric structures appear. A line and its symmetry has to appear. A, a square is plausibly generated by these two symmetric artifacts in a higher order processing. Like two lines can undergo a cross product to form a plane. There is an operation that structures a higher order geometric artifact existent on the same zero. A line has to evolve on a zero, existent on the same zero, yet we must say it is not on the same dimensional plane. Because if a line evolved on a 1D plane, one dimensional plane, it is one dimensional and cannot hold a two-dimensional plane. To say a plane and a line exist on the same geometric space is an absurdity, because the space in a in a two-dimensional space there can be no one-dimensional artifact. Every dx or every differential element in a two-dimensional space has to be two-dimensional. A two-dimensional space cannot be constructed out of one-dimensional dx elements, as today they tend to say in modern mathematics in their calculus, which is an absurdity. It is like saying perfectly flat pieces of paper can be piled up to make a cube, which is an impossibility. So this inherent symmetries in scan generate symmetries in the world. And there could be other kinds of symmetries as these higher order manifold spaces collapse into lower order spaces. It could be that the four-dimensional space collapses into the eight corners of a cube. There should be symmetry in collapse. It stands to reason to think there is symmetry in collapse. This particular insight I came across um, in a talk by that the four-dimensional space collapses into the eight corners of a cube. Um, in a talk or a book on Vedic geometry by Dr. Kapoor. And in that approach as well, in the Vedic geometry approach as well, one is supposed to discover this directly. So I had an email interaction with the author, and the author urged me to try and understand these dimensions directly, and which um, for which the methods, the approaches, uh, the sutras involved, these were called Vedic mathematics. The same approach I have discovered can be undertaken through Zen. It is about accessing the so called idea of direct knowledge.